Hi, welcome to the podcast by Dr. Shushma Singh. Let us start conversation on Unit 4, Thinkers on Education. And our thinker is Basil Bernstein. Basil Bernstein was son of a Jewish immigrant family in London's East End. He served as an underage bombardier in Africa in the Second World War, following which he worked in the Steppe Settlement Boys Club for underprivileged Jewish children. As a child, Bernstein's mind was occupied with simple, basic questions, the answers to which were not part of the curriculum. The questions that filled his mind related to issues that were talked about at home. In his own world, why did my father work so hard? Why did I not see him in the mornings or until late in the evenings? Why did my mother go to work to support me? Why were all the fields I played in being developed by more and larger council estates? Why did we have to walk more than 3 miles to school? Why were the children from my village treated differently from the children from the immediate school locality? After completing 11 plus, Bernstein joined the grammar school in which he felt completely alienated because he could not relate with the structure of content. He found the content dull and the form of its transmission as essentially bewildering. His own experience of learning in school laid the foundation for his ideas on education. Bernstein studied sociology at the London School of Economics, which at that time encouraged schools to explore the influence of social inequality on education, health, and welfare. He chose to focus on education. For a period of about 6 years, he taught in the City Day College. His students were people who had remained unsuccessful in the formal school system. Later, he developed interest in the use of language and its relationship to social class. He explored this domain in the course of a 2-year stay in the Department of Phonetics, University College London. He was appointed senior lecturer in sociology of education sometimes in 1963 and spent the rest of his life conducting research and supervising doctoral and postdoctoral research. Bernstein is widely acclaimed for his contribution to the theory of education. He distinguished between two forms of speech pattern, the restricted code and the elaborated code. Restricted codes, as the term itself suggests, are a kind of shortened speech characterized by short, grammatically simple, often unfinished sentences. One may wonder how communication is possible through restricted codes, despite the fact that apart from others, one of the features of restricted codes is unfinished sentences. Communication is made possible because the conversing parties have shared experiences, which make detailed explication of meanings and intention redundant. Meaning and intention, however, are conveyed through gestures, voice, intonation, and context in which the communication takes place. There is no denying that the communication through restricted code is limited to those who are largely familiar with each other, confined to a specific social group and specific social context. An elaborated code is based on verbalization of meanings and details, many of which are taken for granted in the restricted code. Here, the meanings are not delimited to a specific social content, rather, they are universalistic and available to all. This is possible because the principles and operations are, in large part, made explicit. Bernstein explained the relationship between the speech codes and social class with an example of stories told by two 5-year-old children, one belonging to the working class whom we will refer to here as A, and the other belonging to the middle class whom we will refer to here as B. Both A and B were given 4 pictures based on which they were asked to develop a story. Out of these, the first picture depicted several boys playing football. The second picture depicted the ball breaking a window. The third picture depicted the woman looking out of the window and a man making a threatening gesture to the boys. And the fourth picture depicted boys retreating from the scene. It was found that A used restricted code to narrate the story. The children left many meanings unspoken so that the story was tied to a particular context shown in the picture. In fact, the story could not be understood without the help of picture. Bernstein explained that this was so because in the working class families to which A belonged, position of members was clearly defined in terms of age, gender, and relationship within the family. There was no need for verbal elaboration. By virtue of their authority in the family, the father would give a command such as "shut up," which others would obey. B, on the other hand, used elaborated code to describe the analyze the relationship between the events in an integrated way. The story was comprehensible without the aid of the pictures. Bernstein explained that the contrast to the working class and middle class family to which we belonged, decisions are negotiable and less rigid. Consequently, it was crucial that meaning and intentions were made explicit. He contrasted the working class and middle class in terms of skill set and participation in decision making. According to Bernstein, the use of restricted code by people of working class is also because most of them are engaged in occupations that demand precision in manual rather than verbal skills. They are often not engaged in making decisions. The manual workers are discouraged from developing a elaborated code. This contrasts sharply with the position of middle class people, many of whom are involved in white collar jobs that entail decision making, expertise in verbal skills, hence, they are able to develop elaborated speech code. It is pertinent to understand that formal education is conducted through an elaborated code in which universalistic orders of meanings are transmitted to many students at the same time. This works out to the disadvantage of children belonging to working class families who are given a communicating through restricted codes. Bernstein did accept that the restricted code has warmth and vitality, and simplicity and directness, but it is not compatible with the formal education system. According to Bernstein, the way in which a society classifies, distributes, transmits, and evaluates educational knowledge that it considers to be public, that is available to the masses, reflects the distribution of power as also the principles of social control. Formal educational knowledge may be considered to be passed on through curriculum, which defines what knowledge is considered valid and appropriate for transmission. Pedagogy, which defines what counts as a valid transmission of knowledge, and evaluation, which counts as a valid realization of this knowledge. Code, to refer to the principles that shape curriculum, pedagogy, and evaluation. Goodson explained Bernstein's coding theory, stating that strong classification, that is, rigid boundaries between curriculum categories, denotes a curriculum that is differentiated and separated into traditional knowledge subject to, whereas weak classification denotes an integrated curriculum with weak boundaries. These two types of curriculum are characterized as collection code and integrated code. Framing is the transmission of what is identified as valid school knowledge through pedagogic practices. Frame, in effect, is the employed to refer to the specific pedagogical relationship to the teacher and the pupil. It refers to the strength of the boundary that separates what may be transmitted from what may not be transmitted in the pedagogical relationship. Strong framing implies the presence of sharp boundaries. Weak framing implies the presence of blurred boundaries. Bernstein analyzed the interrelationship between educational codes and the structure of power and principles of social control. Bernstein maintained the stronger the classification and the framing, the more the educational relationship tends to be hierarchical and ritualized, the educand seem as ignorant, with little status and few rights. These are things that one earns rather like spur and are used for the purpose of encouraging and sustaining the motivation of people. Depending upon the strength of frames, knowledge is transmitted in a context in which the teacher has maximum control or surveillance, as in hierarchical secondary school relationship. Further, in early childhood, the frames of collection code socialize children into knowledge frames that overlook connection with everyday realities. What happens as a consequence is that educational knowledge comes to be treated as esoteric, away from the mundane and the ordinary. Those who possesses it therefore are accorded special significance. It is only when this frame is relaxed to incorporate the everyday realities will educational knowledge cease to be a signifier of power and prestige. Here we wind up this conversation, and thank you so much for choosing this podcast.